All right, class, we're going to try this again for week 2. I've already had a couple of runs at it this week that didn't work out, so hopefully third time's a charm. All right, so the assignments due this week are the Module 2 quiz, and then a written assignment, and a couple of tips for the written assignment. Okay. First of all, do not write in the first person. All right. When you write in the first person, it takes away some of the authority and the legitimacy of what you're trying to say. So, no first person. Use sources. Give credit to those sources within your paper, and then use facts and not ambiguous statements like few or many, some. This country is a little bit better than that country, things like that. So try to be specific in your paper, as specific as you can be, and then cite those sources to give them legitimacy. All right? And then the final thing that's due is the first part of your final project, where you're going to tell me what company you're going to represent and what country your company is going to try to establish itself in a new market. All right? So remember, it has to be a developing or emerging market. It can't be a newly industrialized nation, and it can't be a developed country. All right? So I want to make this as, I guess, as difficult as possible, right? So you're given a really challenging task, and like I said before, after you do all the research, if it's not a good fit, that's what you're going to write about in your conclusion. All right? So last week I gave you some places to start. Okay, remember, you can go to the company's own website. You can go to sec.gov and look up under filings, look up the 10K in the annual report, and you can get some history of the company. You can see what projects they're engaged in now, maybe some of their future plans. All right? And then for the country, okay, a lot of countries have their own websites now, especially for tourism and if they're trying to attract businesses. And then also go to the CIA World Factbook, and there's a lot of headings under there that you'll be able to use for your final report, such as the political system, what the infrastructure is like, what the culture is like, things like that. All right? Because as you go through these modules, all right, a lot of the headings of these modules and the chapters are the same ones that you're going to use in your report. And again, I'll go over that report layout later on. So for this week, we're talking about political systems, and you have to remember that some political systems are better for new businesses to come in and operate. So usually that's a democracy, all right? Usually democracy and capitalism kind of go hand in hand because of the freedom in the political system, and so the freedom of the people itself as far as making their own decisions, all right? Also, the stability of that government is important because you don't want to establish a business in that country and then have that government overthrown, or you don't want to have them become unstable and nationalize your business because they need that revenue for themselves. So that's another factor you're going to want to consider. Another thing to consider is the culture of that country and whether it fits with the product that you're going to be trying to sell. So if, obviously, to make an obvious example, if you're Hormel and you're trying to sell a pork product, there's a lot of countries that are not going to accept you because your product does not align with the foods allowed in their culture. All right. A big thing for me are the ethics of the host country. Okay, that's the country that you're going to try to operate in, versus the home country. That's where your home offices are based. All right. So let's take the United States ethics about bribery. All right, so bribery is it's illegal in the United States. It's unethical in the United States. But there are a lot of countries in the world where bribery is a way of doing business. It's a way of sort of greasing the skids so you can get projects started, so you can get government approval. All right, so as you go into these other countries, you're going to have to balance your home country's ethics with your host country's ethics. And that's something you'll want to discuss in your report. What are you going to do when that situation arises? Because you certainly don't want your representatives in that host country getting in trouble either with the host country or with your home country when they come back. Right? Another thing to consider is corporate social responsibility. So when you go through the book, you'll see there are 4 models of corporate social responsibility. One where you're only responsible to return the greatest profit to your shareholders as long as you're doing it legally and morally. To the other end of the spectrum, where you're also not only worried about profit for your shareholders, but also how you treat your suppliers, your vendors, your distributors, and ultimately your customers. All right? And then also what I would call from economics class, people who are affected by externalities, people who are not part of any actual financial transaction with your company, all right? But they're affected by your business. Usually it's through pollution, okay? Maybe it's through changes in the community, the people you're bringing in, all right? So you want to discuss what your corporate social responsibility is, whether it's just that Milton Friedman role where your shareholders are your only concern, all the way to where you're considering your impact on the community, right? Talking about impact on the community, right? How are you going to treat the host country workers that you employ? What sort of wages are you going to pay them? Are you going to pay them something equivalent to local wages? Are you going to pay them something equivalent to home country wages or something in between? All right. What are the working conditions going to be like? A lot of companies, okay, build factories in other countries because the safety standards, the pollution standards, the working hours, child labor laws are a lot different than in the United States. So how are you going to balance, okay, the rules in that country, in that host country, to the rules in your home country? All right. If you think back to some companies in the United States that got in trouble, like Nike and Apple are 2 that come to mind, who went along with what the host country rules were, yet activists in the United States called them on it, all right? And they had to do a lot of PR to fix their image in their home country, even though the the things they were doing were okay in their host country. Some other things are, if your customers are in your host country, are you going to treat those customers ethically? All right. So companies, if you should Google Nestle and Monsanto to see the problems they've had in their worldwide operations. Okay. Nestle has been accused of employing slave labor for their cocoa operations. They've also gotten in trouble because their milk formula, which they heavily promoted in African nations, all right, was not being used properly, and they didn't monitor that because in many of these African nations, the drinking water was not clean enough. The children using their formula were getting sick, okay, and the mothers weren't educated enough to realize why this was happening. All right, so these are just some of the factors that you're going to want to keep in mind as you go through the chapter, and you're going to want to write these things down as, all right, and then as you study your company and your country, fill in some of these things in sort of an outline form, so that when you go to make your outline, go to write your paper, you don't have to start the research all over again. So I would really recommend using some of these chapter bullet points as sort of a guideline as to where you want to focus your paper. All right, let me look through my notes here real quick before I finish up. Another thing you might want to consider is the education level of the people in your host country. All right, if you're setting up a manufacturing plant, all right, you want to make sure that they have the technical skills to operate your machinery. If you're selling some sort of technical product, you want to make sure that the people's education level is enough to warrant them using your product, and also that they have the income level to afford your product, right? Because you may have the greatest thing in the world to help them out, but if they can't afford it, it's just going to sit on the shelves. All right, so if you have any questions during the week, definitely contact me, email me at tgelderman@ivytech.edu. All right, we can do a chat session, we can do texting, we can meet face-to-face. I probably won't do phone call, all right, but if you contact me through email or through inbox, I'll definitely take the time to help you guys out, make sure you're on the right track. Even if you want to ask, you know, if you have a rough draft that you want me to review, I'll do that also and give you some comments on that. All right, so have a great week. Look at those chapters. Remember to look at those headings in the chapters to kind of help guide you for when you start writing that final semester project paper. All right, so again, have a great week, and I'll post another video next week.